So the first contradiction is all about Paul. And Paul had this radical conversion experience. And the question is, when Paul was not called Paul, he was called Saul, did his men hear the voice as well? Let's look at this passage, Acts 9, and then we'll look at Acts 22. It says this: Now Saul was still breathing threats and murder against the disciples of the Lord. He went to the high priest and requested letters from him to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any men or women who belonged to the way, in other words, our faith, he might bring them as prisoners to Jerusalem. As he traveled and was nearing Damascus, a light from heaven suddenly flashed around him. Falling to the ground, he heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? Who are you, Lord? Saul said. I am Jesus, the one who you are persecuting, he replied. But get up and go into the city, and you will be told what you must do. The men who were traveling with him stood speechless, and this is key, hearing the sound but seeing no one. Just tuck that away. Saul got up from the ground, and though his eyes were open, he could see nothing, so they took him by the hand and led him into Damascus. He was unable to see for 3 days and did not eat or drink. Now, the contradiction is supposedly in Acts 22, verse 9, where it says, Now those who were with me saw the light, but they did not hear the voice of the one who was speaking to me. So the contradiction is this. In one passage, it says that they heard the sound but saw no one. And in the second passage, it says, but they did not hear the voice. Now, at first glance, it does certainly sound like a contradiction, but this one is quite easy, and it has to do with the original language, with the Greek. So in the Greek language, there's a difference between hearing a sound and hearing a voice. It's what a guy called G.L. Archer calls a thought-conveying message, hearing a message, having a conversation. So as an example, Sharia is upstairs with JJ right now. And if I was to take my headphones off and stop talking, I would hear, I'd hear these noises, I'd hear these sounds, but I wouldn't hear what Sharia is saying to our son. I just wouldn't be able to process it through the walls. So I'm hearing a sound, but if I was to go upstairs and listen, I would hear thought-conveying messages. There's a difference there. And so what we see in this passage is in one passage, it's saying, actually, they stood speechless, hearing a sound but seeing no one. So they heard something, but they couldn't see anyone, and they certainly couldn't hear the voice that Paul could hear. Where it said, it's further up actually, that Paul heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And then in Acts 22:9, it says, actually, they didn't hear the voice. There's no contradiction there. They still may have heard the sound, but they didn't hear the voice, what Archer describes again as that thought-conveying message. So that's really important. The contradiction, the apparent contradiction, is really only in our contemporary English understanding, our contemporary English phraseology, for want of a better term, I guess. So contradiction number one is no contradiction at all.